Welcome to the Devil in the Details podcast with your host, Will Nesbitt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Devil in the Details podcast, the podcast where I investigate and expose ongoing, unlawful, non-consensual human experimentation on innocent men and women in the U.S. and possibly abroad. I am one of those people victimized by this atrocity, and now I am working hard to restore justice by sharing evidence and information in hopes of prompting a proper investigation. Join me in my fight and help raise awareness by tuning in and sharing this podcast with your family and friends. You're crazy. Two words that someone uses to try to label you with when either they don't believe you or when they don't want others to believe you. And it's a classic abuser tactic. And the implication is that you're either mentally ill or you're just making up accusations for whatever reason, claiming that whatever it is internal and nothing external is happening. No one did anything to you. It's just you. You're hallucinating. You're delusional. And like I said, those are classic tactics of someone who actually did something. Have you ever had that happen to you, where you've made an accusation or a claim against someone that actually really did something to you, and they wanted to convince others that you're crazy? Now, if they try to convince you that you're crazy, of course, that's what they call gaslighting, which is really just basic lying, but they call it gaslighting now. When they don't want others to believe you or hear you out, they make sure they try to beat you to the punch and just say, oh, this person is crazy. That's what I've had to deal with over the course of these 4 or 5 years in trying to explain to people what has been happening with me, with these experiments. And I've been labeled as having gone crazy. I've only had one person tell me this to my face. Others, you can tell just by the way they act and react to what you're trying to tell them, and their avoidance of the conversation entirely. You can tell that that's what they think also. Or they give you little hints that, they think you need to seek professional help. But here's the thing. None of them, not a one, has actually sat down and heard the entire story, or even heard half the story, let alone reviewed any of the evidence that I have been trying to tell them that I have, right? Just automatically. And, like I said, it sounds unreal and it sounds far-fetched. However, truth is stranger than fiction, right? And there are just some classic things, some basic things that you have to ask yourself before even coming to that conclusion, right? You have to ask yourself, how does someone who has been completely sane and intelligent, if I do say so myself, how does one just go crazy, right? How does one just out of the blue, something just clicks off in your brain and you just lose it? And two, what makes you say, well, I don't need to hear or see any evidence? Because that can't be true. And this is something that's just not specific to me. There have been people, victims of other abuses, of other crimes, who've experienced the same thing. Crimes that are actually more common, right? Abuses that are more common when you talk about child abuse, or assaults, sexual assaults, especially by family members or, ministers, things that you hear about all the time. But that people will say you're crazy. And a lot of times the reason for that is fear, basic fear. Fear of, if they listen to it and if they hear it, now they're going to hear the truth and see the truth. And now their relationship with that person now has to change, right? Or they'll actually be required to do something. Sometimes we try to avoid the truth in order to try to avoid taking action that needs to be taken. So we'll try to avoid it and say, no, that can't be happening. No, that's not real. Classic avoidance. And when we do that, we miss out on doing the right thing, which ultimately, depending on the situation, hurts us, because if something goes down and something happens, what's one of the things that people always say? Oh, they should have come to me. Oh, if only they had talked to me. If only they had said something, we would have done X, Y, Z. People shouldn't always have to come to you and tell you that something is wrong. If they're close to you, you should be intuitive enough to be able to recognize that something's wrong. Sometimes people hide it, and there are other times when people, no matter how hard they try to hide it, you can still see it. You see the change in the behaviors. You see the difference in how they act towards you, how they present themselves to the world, how they walk, how they talk, how they, the conversations that they have, or the conversations that they're not having anymore. Maybe they're getting quiet. You see the changes, and yet you're not willing to engage with them to try to correct it, right? It's easier to just say, oh, they're just losing their minds, they're going crazy, than to actually take the steps necessary to say, hey, what's wrong? Because if people don't come and talk to you like you claim they should if something's wrong, they probably don't, for a lot of different reasons. One of those reasons could be, of course, that, it may be too tough for them to talk about. The other reason is maybe they don't feel that they can talk to you. And you have to try to figure out why that is. What is it about you that these people don't feel that they can open up and share those issues or share those deeper parts of themselves? Right? So I'm saying all this to say, don't be so quick to label someone as crazy. This reminds me of just a couple of weeks ago, there was a story about one of the members of the Four Tops, the legendary Motown singing group, the Four Tops. And one of the singers, I can't remember his name right now, but if you Google the story, you'll find it. He had to go to the hospital for, some health issues he was having. And they admitted him, and he was trying to tell them, hey, I'm a member of, this singing group. I'm famous. Can we try to work out something to where, I'm not really around a lot of people, because he has fans, right? And, people sometimes don't have boundaries, and they'll just come up, dudes on a gurney, and they'll just come up trying to ask for autographs, and maybe, hey, get him to belt out a song. He's laying on a gurney, tubes coming out of him. They don't care. But he wanted to prevent that. And they said that this man is delusional. And they admitted him. They put him in a psychiatric hold. Put him in the hospital. Right? He was in the hospital, but they tried to put him in the psychiatric hospital and held him, I believe, for like maybe a couple of days, because they didn't believe that this man was who he said he was, when all they had to do was just a simple check into it. Nobody looked into it, just instantly said, nope, you're crazy. Tie him up, fellas. And that was just wrong. Another example that I will continue to use is, of course, Mr. Elmer Allen, the gentleman who was secretly experimented on for the Manhattan Project. Okay. If you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, I suggest looking at that story. Go back to one of my podcast episodes, and you'll see an interview with his daughter, who goes into detail about her father's situation. It's a really good interview. I highly recommend it. But anyway, Mr. Elmer Allen, they injected him with plutonium. They told him he had cancer, lied to him. And they injected plutonium into his leg and amputated the leg. And they kept checking on him over 40 years to see how this plutonium was affecting his body. And of course, he never knew specifically what they had done to him, but he had a feeling that something was done to him. He was telling everybody, hey, I think I was experimented on. And no one believed him. Everybody thought he was crazy. He had lost his mind. Even this man's doctor in his hometown of Italy, Texas, a little small town, he went to his doctor and he told his doctor, hey, I think I think I was experimented on. His doctor had him diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. Okay, paranoid schizophrenic. But get this, the doctor that had him diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic, he had been contacted by the Department of Energy, who was the government agency that was responsible for the experiments that were being conducted to, make the bomb. They contacted him and said, hey, this guy's information, his medical records, send that information to us. When he comes in to get a checkup or whatever, send us that information. And that's how they were keeping tabs on him for over 40 years, keeping tabs on his health. In addition to having him come out and they examine him. But all of that's in the interview. So that's another example of how people who have done you wrong will label you as crazy to get away with it. I mean, a doctor. If that's not a HIPAA violation, I don't know what is. So he knew. Now, he may not have known that they experimented on him or the extent to what had happened, but he knew something. So I said that to say, don't be so quick to label someone as crazy, or to hear or to listen to those people who label someone as just crazy, because you never know. And that's when you need to start thinking, okay, why are they saying this? Both perpetrator and victim. Why are they saying these things? Also, look at domestic violence situations where you have a spouse who assaults another spouse. And, you know, the perpetrator of the abuse, the abuser, will try to go to others and label them as being crazy, having lost their mind. Especially, and people will tend to believe it because not if they don't see anything happening on the surface, if they're not inquisitive and look deeper, then they'll think that nothing's going on, right? Because we want everything in plain view. To think or look beneath the surface, sometimes that's just too much for people, because it requires thinking outside of the box and seeing beyond what your eyes are showing. So that's why it's easy sometimes for people to get away with things, because they know the average person is not really going to investigate unless it's something that's happening with them, right? I think it was Yukowski. I hope I'm saying his name right. Who said the only time people think about injustice is when it's happening to them. Is it Charles Bukowski? I think it's Charles Bukowski. Either way, if you look up the quote, you'll see who said it. But people don't look beyond the surface. That's why it's so easy for someone to say, oh, this person has lost their mind. So if you don't see physical bruises, or if you don't see them, you know, you see them in public and they're acting, you know, a certain way, they're behaving nicely and cordial and they're all hugged up and all of that. And they're smiling and they're taking pictures and posting them on social media, and you don't see anything wrong, right? And then when something happens, you're like, oh man, I didn't see anything wrong. We see it on the news all the time when they interview the neighbors. When there's a situation and they talk to the neighbors, and the neighbors are all like, I never knew anything was wrong. They always seem like nice people. He always seemed like a nice person. She always seemed to have had it together. Whole time, all kinds of foolishness going on behind the scenes. But because we are so wrapped up in our own lives, because we're afraid to look deeper into things, we miss something. You know, we miss preventing those things that should not happen. And so it is with me. And in my particular situation, you know, it's amazing to me after 5 years of just trying to get people to sit down and listen and just say, hey, listen to this. Look at this, you know, but because they don't see anything that lines up with how they imagine something like this would go, they just tune it out and say, well, he's gone. He's lost his mind, right? Which I guess maybe I've partially lost my mind because they talk to me and have conversations with me, about other stuff like normal. But I guess, maybe I'm having, partial mental illness, just in just one delusion, and everything else is okay, right? So it can be difficult to try to explain things to people. So you have to get creative to find different ways to get folks' attention. So that's the reason for this podcast, these recordings, is to get the attention of people in hopes that I can get the right information to the right people. Because there is enough evidence that I've gathered to prompt an investigation. And that is what I want. That's what I need. Me and others that are like me who are experiencing this. There needs to be an investigation to uncover who exactly is behind this, all the players that are involved, and to get this to stop. That is the main reason for this entire podcast, right? It's not telling you this just in case something happens, somebody will know. That does nothing, right? I'm telling you this to, number one, to stop it, and number two, to get the right information to the right people, to prompt a proper investigation, an independent investigation, because you can't trust the government to really do it, because I've tried reaching out to them and they won't do it. And there are reasons for that, which if you sit down and listen to and look at the evidence, you will see why that is. So I urge you, listen to the podcast, read the petition, read the articles, join my social media pages, and ask questions. Ask questions. If there's something that you don't understand, or if you look at it and say, hey man, this sounds nuts. How can something like this happen? All right, now I'll say, well, let me explain it to you. Right? Because that's the only way you're going to know. Without someone telling you, if it's something that's new and something that you've never heard of or dealt with before, you need someone to instruct you. It's like, let's say you're looking through a microscope, okay? Let's say you're looking through a microscope. You have two people. You have a scientist and you have a layperson like myself, okay? And let's say you take some sort of substance, put it on the little clear tray that they have, and you stick it under the microscope. Now, if you take two people, one who's an expert, the other who is not, and you have them both look under the same microscope, they may look at the same and see the same thing visually, but they're going to have two different understandings of what they're looking at, because one, the expert, will understand what they're seeing, and the other, the layperson, will have no clue. They'll just say, okay, I see this thing shaped like a circle, and I see this other thing that looks like a piece of hair, and they're just kind of moving around. I don't know what this is. And the expert can tell you, oh, no, that's a thingamajig, I don't know. So that is the difference. You need someone that has the experience to be able to sit down and tell you, because it is the person who has the experience, like myself, that I'm the expert. Okay. After 5 years and a lot of research and a lot of investigation and a lot of hours thinking and gathering, all kinds of evidence. I'm an expert at this. So I'm the one you need to listen to. If you're listening to people that have not investigated this, have not looked into it at all, if you're listening to them, you're going to miss something because they're not the experts. What you need are experts, number one, not just people who are knowledgeable in a particular field, but who also have integrity. Okay? Who also have integrity. Because you can have someone that's an expert in advanced weaponry or some sort of government official. But if this person has no integrity, they could lie to you, right? And you wouldn't be the wiser because you wouldn't look beyond their title or their position to be able to discern whether or not this person is lying to you or steering you in the wrong direction. Okay? Because there are people who are experts who will intentionally lead you in the wrong direction so that you don't see, so that you don't look beyond. Because think about it. The perpetrator has to misdirect you. They have to give you misinformation or else they get caught. They're not going to give you the information that you need to expose them. And they know that you're going to trust their word. So they're going to lie to you. That minister who is having an affair or abusing his wife or, abusing children or stealing money or whatever, he's going to use that position, that title as a man of God to mislead you. Now, there are some men with integrity who will come forward after some time and say, hey, you know what? I did this. Let me step down, whatever. But for the most part, they're going to use that position to get away with it. Same thing with people in government. Okay? All sorts of situations. So you have to see what lies beneath. You have to listen to the victims. And it is my plea to you that you really take the time to hear me out, to listen to the evidence and to think, okay? Because that's important too. Don't believe me just because I'm telling you. Think about it. Put the pieces together. If I'm giving you information, think about it. Weigh it. Okay? Weigh the evidence and say, does this fit? Is this likely? Okay? That's what you have to do. That's why in law they call it the preponderance of evidence. You have to ponder on it. You have to think on it. And that's what I need you to do, is to listen, think, and then once you understand it, draw others in. Because the more people we get involved, the more people that we can get behind us, the better. Okay? We saw how it worked with Julian Assange, who was just freed, right? For doing what? For being a journalist, for exposing the truth. United States wanted to bring him back here so they could basically kill that man. But people around the world said no. They protested for him. They fought for him. And while the outcome, I don't believe, was 100% just, it was a more favorable outcome than what could have happened had people not come together and fought for him. And so I'm asking you to join me in my fight. because this not only affects me, this does affect you as well. Because today it's me, tomorrow it could be you. It could be your children. It could be your family. It could be your friends or your neighbor. Because whenever there's an experiment being conducted, it's being done on a small scale in order to figure out how it can be used on a large scale. So we got to get it together. So please, by all means, listen to the podcast. Join me for my live talks, which will be coming soon. I haven't figured out a platform because I got to figure out how all that stuff works. But join me for all of those. Sign my petition, share my petition. Please, please, please do that. And we'll get this thing together. I do appreciate your time for listening and hanging out with me. And that's all for today. Peace.